The Art Center inspires creativity and contributes to
community well-being
through equitable access to
and engagement with visual arts.
We collaborate to offer exhibitions,
learning opportunities, artist development,
and cultural events centered on
art, artists, and art enthusiasts in the greater Corvallis area.
Hello, my name is Claire Elam. I am the Artist Accelerator Program Director at the Art Center. I'm here today with Kimberly Long, and she's here to talk about our current exhibit, Evolutions of Practice, in the Footwise window in Corvallis. Kim, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Hi, Claire. I'm grateful to be able to speak with you today on my artwork and about the evolution of practice. So thank you for having me. To begin, I am an artist here based in Corvallis. We moved here 7 years ago from Salt Lake City, and originally I was from Pueblo, Colorado, where I grew up and loved playing with all forms of art and painting and Play-Doh, and I even tried to make Play-Doh into ceramics on our piano stool by a spray bottle and spinning it really fast. Needless to say, it did not work, but it began a love of being able to create and sculpt and make, and being in Corvallis has given me a lot of opportunity to explore with different mediums such as clay and wool, which is what I'm working with today.
Thanks, Kim. Why don't you tell me a little bit about what your work looks like for people who are just listening and haven't seen it before, and some of the ideas around what you make?
The pieces I began making in the Artist Accelerator Program 5 years ago are called Nooks, and they're doors and dwellings for whimsical wanderers, mostly of the imaginary type, some of the more smaller critter types that you could find in your garden, so little mouse houses or toad abodes, some butterfly puddlers, and they're no more than about a foot high and just a little bit wide. They have wood textures for doors, stone, surrounds, a little stoop for just the doors, and then the buildings often are tall that you could place in like a bookshelf for all the characters in your books to kind of retreat to, or in the garden as well. For more of those imaginary characters, there's windows or chimneys, just little features to kind of add some warmth to them. And from the Nooks came a variety of critters and creatures from wool, so I make dragons and different sizes, whelps, hatchlings, and they all have little faces with big eyes and fun little shapes. There are also mice. I've been having a lot of fun with mice, and I think that comes from my stories of the Pied Piper and wanting to know that the mice were okay and not really in the river after all. So he led them somewhere else. So I've been playing a lot with mice. And then my latest creations has come from more of fae or fairy elves. I call them wanderers because they have many different characteristics than the traditional ones of the fairy books or fairy tale books, and they have expressive faces, and some have told me their eyes follow them, which is always fun and a little creepy, but that's kind of like Grimm's fairy tales and exactly where I wanted to be. So it's been fun seeing the wanderers come to life too.
So being privy to your work for a long time now, I've seen that you have been working with some of the cultural folk tales and embedding those or building characters from that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
The cultural folk tales I draw from are a lot of different regions, some of my own and some that I have admired that I didn't realize I admired until I was older and started really digging into the source of things that were part of my life the whole time. So one of the books I have is Tales Our Abuelitas Told Us, and it's a really neat collection of stories that were handed down. And because of the culture, a lot of those stories weren't always written down. So there's variations, and the author talks about the variations within the tales and why they chose this variation over that. And it's been really fun to read those, because growing up with my own grandma, she would tell us stories, and finding the similarities in those folk tales have been a lot of fun. There's one, Raton Perez, and he is a little rat that drowns in a soup because he went for the onion when he shouldn't have, and he didn't listen to his wife. And so I kind of think that's where also the mice inspiration has come. I want to do a full collection of that story at some point, and kind of create it into one visual piece to represent it. Then the other piece that I've really been digging into is the Nordic folktales, because the gnomes, or Nissa, were another wanderer that I started creating from wool. They were my first personality that came out from the animal style, and it was neat to see. So I wanted to know where the garden gnome came from, and through my research I found out that a lot of the British garden gnomes come from the Nordic Nissa, or Tontus or Tomties, and each region has a different name for them, and they live in barns because the humans kept taking over their spaces, and so they would come in to the barns because it was nicer. But when the humans didn't know that, they would try to chase them out and get mad at them and push them out, and then the Nissa would fight back and make a mess of their barns or cause havoc. And so the humans learned that they needed to give the Nissa fair treatment and respect them and offer them their porridge with the butter on top, never on bottom. And finding the history behind these iconic images has been a lot of fun, and then making the iconic images into something of my own has been a piece that I wish I could say I intended to do, but it just kind of came about organically, and they're finding me as much as I'm finding them.
That's great. I love how so many folk traditions are really that orally passed down. Folk music changes. There's some, Nordic folk songs that go, and you can find them in Appalachia or wherever, and they're the same song. They have some of the same words, and it just becomes part of that. I love how some of the folk traditions are often passed down orally or culturally through mimicking other cultures, or somebody visits and passes down a song, and eventually it goes from Norway all the way to Georgia in the mountains, and every area thinks that they own it. And then you really find out through research and globalization and all of that how deeply ingrained so many stories are in each culture. You talk a little bit about nature and these creatures and spaces living in nature, cohabitating nature, and respecting kind of the characters or little species that you create. Does that play into your practice, or how important is the nature and the concepts that you work with or around versus the craft of the making? Because so many of the tools and materials that you use, many would consider craft, and you've brought them into a gallery space. How does that change their meaning, and where does that lie for you?
The concept of craft versus art has been something I've been wrestling with all along since the beginning, because the very first time I started needle felting, I got a really cute craft kit online, and I just copied step per step and made exactly what I saw, which was wonderful. And I was able to figure out how the tools worked, how the material worked. And the very next day after finishing it, I was not at rest. I wanted to make something else. And I searched for the something else, which was a dragon. And I've always wanted and had a love for dragons, and wanted to find the perfect dragon for my collection, which didn't exist because I never could find the perfect dragon for my collection. So I stopped trying to search for it, and I thought, okay, finally I can make it. And I credit my grandfather for that, because everything we wanted, he told us, so I can make that. And he did. It was amazing. So I have that gene of I can make it. And so I had a little bit of material left over from that first craft kit, and I thought of a shape, and I started making the shape, and I went a little bit further and a little bit deeper, and I kept just trying. I just wanted to try. I didn't know if I was going to do it, or if I was even going to like it, or if I'd go back to get another kit. And sure enough, I got frustrated enough that I went back to another kit. And I found a couple other things that I liked making, and they were fun. But again, it just didn't satisfy that need of wanting to make this thing that I knew existed but hadn't found yet. So I recently heard, I think it was John Cleese said that art comes from the subconscious, and our creativity comes from the subconscious. And being able to put it in that term really made sense for me, because I knew that I wanted to make my own. And I appreciated the craft, I appreciated the technique, and I need those skills and those rules in order to rewrite them all. And that was when I realized that this is crafty, this is something that is anybody can do, which is wonderful. And I love when everybody can join me, or anybody can join me in making these things. And I'm excited when it's more of my piece or my original piece that I've taken from other people as well. And so I think ideas of my subconscious through the craft of what I'm learning come together in order to make the things that I want to be able to express. And so after the first 2 or 3 kits that I think I found just to make random things that I saw online, I had enough skill to make my dragon. And now I have a dragon that measures over 1 foot tall. And I never would have thought I could have made something from an online kit to something this big. So I think with the craft comes the ability to be able to make the art. And as long as I stay true to what it is, and that feeling of restlessness to satisfy what it is that is within me that I want to create, is where the art piece comes in. And as far as the nature piece of it is, I take these little moments of interactions, whether it's with the many creatures that are wandering my yard, from the deer and the turkey and the 5 raccoons picking up the figs from the fig tree and then climbing into the fig tree and almost shaking it so more fall down. I witness these interactions with the creatures outside my window, or I'll hear noises sitting in the forest thinking that has to be something that is not of this world, and imagining what it could be. Or even in the stillness of the night in the forest, when I hear or see something that I can't explain, I imagine the stories or the folk tales again, and using those as explanations to comfort themselves from the fear of the unknown. And it's been fun being able to be surrounded by the nature as that source of inspiration. And I think it all feeds that subconscious piece that comes into the art, that it's taken now 5 years, and I get to reflect on it to see how it's all coming together. And I wish I could say I intended most of it, but it's just come together again very naturally.
That's great. Thank you. So to wrap up, we have added kind of this question to every interview we've given for all of the artists participating in the Evolution of Practice show. You're currently exhibiting work at Footwise. In this exhibit, kind of about practice and evolution, we talk a little bit about the idea of an evolving practice and what that means to you, maybe where you see kind of your practice going in the next few years, maybe even, imagining what it might be like in 10.
As I said before, the Knooks welcomed the creatures and the critters, and now they're welcoming the wanderers, which has been exciting to see the formation of the faces and the features. It's really neat to look back at the first attempt at a mouse, which was kind of scary, to the current attempt, which is a little more cute. And the wanderers have gotten a lot more personality as well, and characteristics. Evolving to this point has been a need to make sure I stay true to who I always wanted to be, which is fantasy, and keeping with the elves and the gnomes and the Nissa and fairies, finding other independent artists that have been able to help teach me skills and mentor me through a lot of these pieces has been exciting as well. And finding that community of the original one-of-a-kind dolls, they're also called oak dolls, has been a really fun opportunity to meet people from all around the world. So evolving has been a sense of self, but also a sense of community, which has been enriching in so many different ways. As far as in the future, I hope to be able to keep creating and growing and getting bigger, because I've been encouraged by many to keep going bigger, and I want to go bigger and smaller and experiment with sizes and forms, characteristics, and keep building, not to an extravagant point, but to a detailed point. And it's always been about the little things with me and the little moments with me. The impact, for me at least, would be amazing to see. So I want to keep with all three forms of ceramic and wool to the cosplay, polymer clay that I use now, and found objects. I just want to stay curious.
I love the idea of you creating bigger and bigger, or micro, and kind of seeing those two come together in the same piece, or in the same kind of home. I wonder if someday I'll see you, many years from now, building, a set piece for your own movie with all of these characters, and how big that could get. It's exciting to see you grow over the last 5 years, and to be able to see you kind of explore new media, new subject matter, and just I'm looking forward to seeing where you go. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will leave it at that.
Thank you for listening to TAC Makes. This is a new creative project at the Arts Center, and I hope you enjoy our learning curve as much as we do. You can find more episodes on YouTube and Spotify, and on our website, theartscenter.net. That's arts with an S.